So the response I've gotten on the videos I made about building my sort of GT40 has completely blown me away. I didn't really expect anybody to watch them at all. I think I owe a lot of thanks to a writer at Road and Track who did an article for their online blog about it. And what surprised, I mean, it was surprising that they wrote the article, but then on top of that, reading the article, they clearly watched the whole thing. If you haven't read the article, go look at it. It's better than watching the videos because it's much more concise. The comments have been super supportive. It kind of restores my faith in mankind a little bit. I was almost hoping nobody would watch the videos because I was sure I would just get unsolicited critiques. So based on things people are asking in the comments, I'm going to try to put some more content out there. I've got a number of videos coming in the next few weeks. We're going to do things like, some people assume that you need thousands of dollars of tools to do what I did. And I'm going to show kind of the simple and cheap tools that I use for most of it. I'm going to do a more in-depth video on the IndyCar, on the Lotus 38. I've got an autocross event coming up where I'm going to swap rides with a couple of great guys who've got Factory 5 Racing Daytona Coupes. That should be a lot of fun. I've got my first track day in the GT40 at Sonoma in just over a month, so we'll do a video on that. It could be exciting. Maybe the car will blow up. Maybe we'll get it on camera. Let's hope so. Just, if it's gonna blow up, get it on camera. That's all that counts. I'd like to get my son in to, he's got some very strong opinions on everything, and it's always fun to hear about. And then we've got what we're gonna look at in this video, which is, I'm getting a lot of questions and comments about, will I post my plans that I use for my GT40 on the internet so other people can use them. Now let me start off by saying I love the idea of creating kind of an open source community thing for building your own race cars, GT40s, whatever. I think that could be really cool. If somebody out there wants to tackle that, that's a little beyond my field of expertise, but I will gladly contribute everything. Maybe everything I contribute is just, hey, this is what this idiot did, so take what you can from it. But I would gladly contribute to that. Okay, the bad news is I'm hesitant to give out the actual plans for my GT40 for a couple reasons. I don't want to step on the toes of the numerous replica and kit car makers out there. Guys who do what we do, we need those places to exist. We need them for parts. We need them for fiberglass work. We need them, even if you're not buying parts from them, when you're looking at lights and switchgear and just all of the shifting mechanisms, all these kind of things, that's why those parts are being manufactured and are out there, is because they've created a market for it. So we don't want to hurt their business. On a more personal note, I haven't updated my plans since I built the car. And when I built the car, there were some small changes I made. Nothing drastic, but little adjustments that I made as I saw, oh, this isn't going to work, or this will work better, or this will be easier. Further, having built the car, there are some things I would do differently. And so at some point, I need to make new plans that, fix my mistakes and get everything up to date and be exactly how, be useful plans. Why would I give you like, oh, here, this has some mistakes in it, good luck figuring it out. So that's the bad news. The good news is there's more to this video, and I'm going to give you some, I think, really helpful information. But before I do, just to drive you crazy, I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice that you're not going to want to hear because I wouldn't have wanted to hear this when I was doing it. And that is, you should really start by getting a body, wherever you can source it. If you're getting it off eBay, if you're getting it from one of the replica car makers, there are a lot of different replica GT40s, and their bodies aren't all going to be interchangeable. So if you start with the body, you're going to know your dimensions exactly. To put another reason on, I built the chassis before I got most of the body, except for I only did part of the firewall bulkhead, but that's the back of the seats in front of the engine, because that goes to the roof. And I only did part of it. I only did up to a certain level. I did below the window until I had the roof structure. And when I had the roof, then I built the rest of it to match the roof. Because there was no way I was going to get those measurements right without having the roof there. And in fact, when I did it, I remember cutting the pieces for the little bits of side to go all the way out to where the roof is and all the way up and the curve to it. And I remember putting the pieces from the left side to the right side on top of each other after they were all cut, and they were not the same length. And I want to say, it wasn't a huge difference, but I want to say close to a half inch or something like that. And so I was like, okay, I don't have the roof on straight. So I messed with it a bunch, and I got them a little better, but they were never exactly right, one side or the other, which I wouldn't be surprised if an original is slightly wonky. They were handmade to a certain extent. I mean, they were stamped and stuff, but final assembly, there's going to be some variations. And so all that to say, if you want to save yourself a lot of trouble, get the body first and do your measurements off of the body that you have. And then if you want to take it further, the body is probably the single most expensive thing on the car. If you're talking about all as one, I think I spent $9,000 on mine. Now, I've seen deals out there where somebody finds one on eBay that's like, I did a kit, I didn't finish it, I got to get rid of this stuff, and it was only $5,000. That would be awesome if you can do that. But generally, if you're going to go buy one, I think you're looking, because I got some good deals on mine and on my parts, and I made some of mine myself. I didn't get all of it. I think you're going to be looking for anywhere between $9,000 or $10,000 to $15,000. If you go to Superformance, it's $15,000 for one part, or for like the rear clip. I know because I tried to buy one from them. I couldn't afford it. Knowing that, Tornado, who I know somebody that had a Tornado GT40, and he used to vintage race it, and he was pretty competitive with it, and it was their simple tube frame one. They have an aluminum tub one and a carbon fiber one, but this was just their basic tube frame one, and it was fast. One of those kits starts around $12,000, and for that you get the entire body, you get the chassis, and you get, I think, the suspension, which that saves you a ton of work right there. You could take that, and if you still really want to make your own chassis, you could take their chassis and you have all the pickup points, you have all the dimensions you need, and you can just copy it. Or you do what a lot of us would do, like, why would I go make my own? I got this one right here. Had I realized I was going to have so much trouble doing the body, I probably would have started with the Tornado kit, even though I really wanted to, because it wasn't just that I wanted a GT40, I wanted to make my own race car. So I probably should have started with their kit and then still made my own chassis out of it. I actually haven't had the best experience dealing with them. Not terrible, just they're like race car replicas. They're really good people. Their kit costs more, but it includes more stuff, and they're really great people to work with. I don't want to really. I'm just trying to give advice based on what I've experienced. I'm not trying to endorse one thing or the other. But before you dive into this giant rabbit hole, I just want you to think about that, because you might end up spending more to do more work. But now that I've lectured you on things you didn't want to hear, because it sucks to buy a body and then have it sitting there and it's taking up space and it's in the way, and you want me to buy a body and a chassis, I'm not going to use the chassis, what am I going to do with the chassis afterwards? I know, that's why I didn't do it that way. I built the chassis first. It was cheaper. My chassis, I think, was $1,700 in materials. I was able to do that while I was saving up money for the next thing, which I got, and then while I worked on that, I saved up money for the next thing. And I get that. That's the way I like working. I like doing it so I've got something to do. So, okay. So let's dive into looking at some GT40 plans. So the first thing we're going to look at is the information that's already available on the internet. And I'm providing it in the video, and I'm providing links down below. I got them from a Lotus 7 builders group, which is kind of homemade Lotus 7s. This is already out there. You can't blame me for putting this out there. I'm just saying I found it. Here's what I found. They're obviously a low resolution. It's hard to read some of the numbers. The numbers are in feet and inches, which is kind of annoying if you're outside the US, and even if you're inside the US, it's annoying when you're trying to add things up to get total dimensions. But this is useful information. I found this after I had already made my plans. Having looked at my plans in my finished car and looking at these, all the numbers are very close. So I'm just saying that as an endorsement that there is nothing out of whack on these plans. If you use these plans, I don't think you'll have any trouble making a GT40 body fit. If you just Google GT40 plans, you'll find plans you can buy, like send it to you on a USB drive or something. There are books out there with plans. There's a lot of things out there. I don't know that any of them are complete. Some of them seem pretty sketcy. I haven't seen most of them because by the time I found these, I already had my plans laid out from just looking at pictures. But the information's out there, and what I tried to express before is the more data points that you have, the more you can connect the dots. When there's a length you don't know, but you know these other three lengths, you can figure out, well, it's got to be in this ballpark, and then from over here I figured out this length, which then that means this, and now I know exactly what that has to be. But now that we've looked at that, Let's look at some just kind of basic things. Again, these aren't specific designs. This is just generalizations to help get you started thinking about how you can do your own design. Now, there's things we know about GT40, which is it has a 95-inch wheelbase and a 55-inch track. And they started at 55 inches, and then the fronts went up to, I think, 57, and the rears 56. And that really had to do with the wheels and tires getting wider and where they ended up fitting. But we'll just start with 55 inches. These are representations of your wheels. This is rear, this is front. These are, I've got 8-inch wide with 24-inch diameter here, and 10-inch wide and 26-inch diameter in the rear. And this is really how you design a race car. You put out where the wheels are going to be first. The tires are the most important part on a race car. That's anything you build makes its contact with the road through the tires. So you start there. These are things we know. Okay, then where I started, because we're not building just anything, we're building a GT40. So this is the space, this is the inner space you're going to need for the engine and the transaxle. The transaxle is actually going to stick out here, but the bell housing is going to connect to the engine here, and you're probably going to have your the top of this rear bulkhead be just behind where that bell housing is. And the higher you have this, the closer it can be to the engine. The more it's lower, the more you've got the curve of the bell housing to contend with, so the further back it would have to be. I've written 36 to 40 inches, and that's because the bulkhead here, the firewall, the driver sits here in a proper one, or if you're in America, you sit over here. This bulkhead's at an angle, and I have it at, on mine, it's 12 degrees. So it's leaning back from here to here, 12 degrees, and I'll show you on a profile view. So because of that, at the top, you've got less distance to here than at the bottom, unless you do like I did and you make this at an angle too. And I actually made mine at 24 degrees in the back. So 12 degrees here, 24 degrees from perpendicular here. We'll look more at that in a second. But that's why I have 36 to 4 inches. You really need 36 inches for your Ford V8. If you're using a different engine, it's going to be different. But that's with a Ford V8 with a pretty darn short water pump. I've got an electric water pump, and it's the shortest option that I've found without just not having a water pump here and having it be in line somewhere else. Okay, so we've got that. We know we need this amount of space. I've got this here, 22 inches. This coming out is a good way of making the structure stiffer. You don't need this much space. You could have 22 inches and come straight back, but it would be tight, and having this, especially if you're going to have an alternator and any kind of accessories on the engine, having this extra space helps. So I have 26 inches on this end, 22 inches on this end. All right, now the next thing I would say you need is you need at least 12 inches in your footwell for where the pedals go and where your feet are going to go, and you might want more. I've had people complain that my pedals are too close together, and I'm like, hey, it's a standard race car pedal box. This here is for the passage for the coolant tubes, and I have this at 4 inches here. It's what I built. You could probably make it 3 inches, and that would give you a little more space. You could make it 2 inches, but you're kind of pushing it. You're going to want at least 1.5 inch pipes going through here, one on top of the other. I guess you could make it just over 1.5 inches and use your leg as part of the cooling system, because it'll burn your leg, and then your blood will carry that heat around your body, and yeah, there you go. You're now cooling the car. Another thing you could do is, I've drawn this with this in the center. Something else you could do is move this to the side. The passenger, one, you could just say, hey, this isn't a passenger car, it's a race car, I don't really need passengers. So you could just totally encroach on that. The other thing is, because the passenger doesn't have pedals, their feet don't need to their feet can be anywhere in here. They don't need as much space. So you could move this over maybe 2 inches and they'd still be comfortable. And that would give you 2 more inches over here, which isn't a bad idea. Okay, next. So these are the sponsons, and these are your fuel tanks will go inside here. Again, we're just doing simple shapes, just showing the things that you need. So I'm doing 64 inches here. That's what's are on the other plans. The other plans have this here being 8.5 inches, I actually have mine at 9 inches wide. We'll see on another plan, they should be 10.5 inches tall. This makes up the basis of a GT40. You're going to end up with some tube scaffolding kind of arrangement here for the radiator that'll go out in front. And you're going to have some back here for holding the back of the transaxle. And something of note is with most replicas, and I think it's true of the Mark IIs because they had the bigger engine, the rear axles are at a bit of an angle, meaning that the output shaft is back here. Maybe not that far, but they're not straight. You know, this is all back a little bit. Now, for dynamic purposes, for handling purposes, you want this engine as low and as far forward as possible. But the other thing is, and this is the main reason my rear bulkhead here is angled, is because I needed this to be pretty close to where the suspension was going to come out. I think mine's actually a little bit forward of this. But at the bottom, I needed it to not be in the way of the axles because the axle stubs coming out of the transaxle are here, and I needed there to be an opening. So it ends back here. So bear in mind that, yeah, you're going to have your axles going through here. But let's continue. Okay, wait, I want to come back to this to point out, again, this here is inside dimension that you need. So if you're building this with tube steel, your tube steel is going to come out outside of this. And these squares right here are 2 inches to scale, so halfway through, over here it'd be easier to see. So you'd be making a structure out here, and here you'd have a structure out here. These are outside dimensions, so you'd be doing a structure inside. Okay. Okay, so now this is more specific to what I did. And this looks a little complicated, but that's just because on this half, you're seeing the top of the structure, and on this half, you're seeing the plans for the bottom of the structure. And this is what I was talking about, these bulkheads being angled, so that at least at this height, this is moved back. You know, this is where the bottom is, this is where the top is, this is where the bottom of the rear bulkhead, this is where the top is. And this is actually a little extreme. Again, don't try to build this exactly and blame me when it doesn't fit. This is just generalities. You need at least this much down here, but up here it needs to be further to clear the bell housing of the transaxle. But you see how doing this allows the output shafts on the transaxle to be, say, about here. Maybe you get the engine even further forward and they're perfectly in line. But they're here and there's no structure in the way between here. You'd probably have a tube underneath here and triangulate it to hold the back of the transaxle and then the rear clip. I apologize for the wind. It's driving me crazy. So looking at this, what I have is, on the bottom, I have some tube steel here. So on the bottom, it's just 1 inch thick. But on the top, it's basically making almost a triangle, except that it's not coming to a point. It's coming to this 1 inch. On the top, it's 3 inches. And that's giving it some rigidity. And that also translates to how this attaches to the sponson. And then you can see that better up here. Let's move this in. So this is what's going on with the structure. This here is the structure, what the cooling pipes are going through. Steel tube, steel tube. This actually made a triangle of steel tubes there, but then it's all backed with aluminum, and there's aluminum sheet doing that, and this, and the top's covered, and there's aluminum sheet covering all of this with just the openings for the coolant pipes. So from a structural standpoint, really the car is the engine bay, then supported by the fuel tank area, which then connects to the subassembly for the front suspension. And this here is actually also strengthened by where the dash is going to go. You end up with a cowl structure that comes out over the wheel a little bit and comes out over here and really helps tie all this together. There's a major oversight on my drawing, and I just want to show you on the real thing that on the sponsons, they're narrower on the bottom than they are at the top. It's a trapezoid figure, and on an original it's actually curved a little bit. So on the drawings, I should have actually had this stick out less far for the bottom view than the top view. But it's important to know that because this is going to curve and you need this to be shorter for that to fit in there. Also, totally off topic, but the lower suspension trailing arm goes through this structure. So have fun with that. So you can make these structures out of aluminum sheeting and just fold your aluminum. Here, I actually have steel making this structure just tube steel reinforced by stressed aluminum riveted over it. You could just do that. You could make this all aluminum. Well, you'd want a steel bulkhead here and here. And then what you would do is for your motor mounts is you'd probably make metal brackets that would then spread that weight out on the aluminum, maybe come out over here and then down on the sides as long as possible to give you as much surface area to rivet it and or bond so that that load is spread out over the aluminum. Okay, and then to give just another view. So this is it in profile, and the two measurements you really need to know are that this is 10.5 inches and this is 10.5 inches. If this is 10.5 inches, the base of your roof structure will be right here, will be correct at this height, and 10.5 inches down is what you need for your sill panels to go over it. This height, I honestly don't even know right now. I'd have to go measure mine, and it's tricky because it's inside. There's layers of, there's the top of the fiberglass roof structure, and there's a inner thing, and this goes up into it, so I'm not even sure I can get an accurate measurement on what I have there. But this is what I'm talking about. You really need your body before you do this all the way up. I built mine to like about here and left it. But some other things to consider is for where the seat's going to mount, having an aluminum structure here, this stiffens this. It also would then attach across the floor here. So when you're sitting in it, it would really, this here is the only kind of open spot. This is supported here. This here is your legs would come up over there. And on different race cars, you could put things in there. You could hide a small battery in there, or it's really too small an opening for really a battery or a fire suppression system. But those are things that you find there. There's something you need to put in there. You could hide something in there, electronic stuff. But again, this creates a structure. This goes all the way from one sponson all the way to the other, which is connecting both sides and helping make the whole thing more rigid. You'd have suspension pickups, probably the rear ones somewhere in here. And the front ones I have here, but I would actually recommend moving them here. I recommend moving them further in here so you can get a longer arm. So this isn't moving in so much as it goes up and down. And you can do that both on the top and the bottom. When you put your suspension points on, the pickup points that the suspension attaches to, it's important that they be supported as well as possible. So say you you've got a suspension point here and here, you want structure that would carry the side loads all the way to the other side so this isn't flexing. I mean, you're not worried about it breaking, you're just worried about it flexing and giving you erratic handling. Where it gets tricky and where a lot of the engineering and chassis comes in is, say your lower pickup's here, great, that's easy. But your upper pickup isn't here, it's like here or something. And if you, on the front, yeah, you could have something here because it's the front, there's nothing else there. But say you want a thing in here on the upper one, well, suddenly that's where your feet need to be. So you end up getting creative and maybe it comes up here a little bit or something. It's simple to say what would be perfect, but the second you have to fit a driver in there, everything becomes compromises. Actually, everything in race cars is compromises. Back at this drawing, again, I did based on the plans that I got off the internet. This is showing a vertical bulkhead. Again, I've talked about mine being actually from this point here, so be an angle like that. So this is leaning back 24 degrees. This is 12 degrees. If you want to be nice and safe, originals don't have this, but if you put a tube on each side from here to here, that would triangulate this, and you could have your roll structure in here, and that would be a heck of a lot safer, if you care about such things. There's a lot more you should probably know about building your own frame. So just as kind of a primer, and go on the internet, you can get all of the information you need on this. pretend these are steel tubes and are bigger. I'm just trying to say, there's a structural rectangle. This is going to flex under load. It's going to, I just broke it a little bit. That's because it's going to flex. So when you hear guys talk about triangulation, what they're talking about is putting a diagonal in there. And the idea is that now, in order for it to twist, and my diagonal's a little short, in order for it to twist, it's either going to pull or compress this diagonal piece of metal. And you really want things in tension. You want things pulling on it because steel is much stronger that way. In compression, it can buckle and give. But the thing is, if you have this on one side and then you have another one on the other side of the car, when it twists one way, one side will be in tension and the other side in compression, and then it'll switch the other way, which means no matter which way it twists, you always have something in tension, and that's what makes it stiff. So anytime you have a rectangle, you put a triangulation through. People refer to this kind of thing as a space frame, and if you want to get technical, a true space frame is really, really difficult to actually do in a race car because mainly because you have to have an opening where somebody sits. A true space frame means you always have something in tension and its stiffness comes that way. But just doing regular, technically this is just a multi-tube arrangement. With triangulation, you can make a really stiff structure. The next option, though, you can do is you've got this, and pretend this is a sheet of steel or aluminum, usually aluminum. You can rivet this on like that, and now it's doing the exact same thing that this was doing, except it's the entire surface, and it's no matter which way it goes, you've got it being pulled in tension in some way. So that's another way to do it. And then, of course, the last way is don't use this at all and just make your structure out of the aluminum to start with. I will say, I like what we call monocoques in race cars, which they're just like the space frame thing. They're not true monocoques, but in my case, it's an aluminum tub. I like that kind of construction. I think it's cool. However, there's a lot to be said about a tube frame construction, which I'll demonstrate right here. When you need to work on it, it's really nice to be able to get in and reach into things. So if you're going to go that route, it can be cheaper and it'll be something easier to work on, even if it's not maybe as glamorous as an aluminum tub. I'm a chassis snob. So I hope that helps. Everything I drew there, those weren't specific plans, but everything you saw was in the correct ballpark for what you'll probably end up doing. Again, my GT40 was made, it's not even a GT40. I made it to fit me and meet certain criteria that I needed, which are probably going to be different for you. So I really encourage, if you're not I encourage you to go buy a replica. But if you're not going to do that, if you're not going to buy a kit, if you're going to make your own, you make it your own. Design it to work for what you want it to do. And you could take the same general principles of engine transaxle in the rear, front subassembly connected basically by side gas tanks to make any number of race cars from the 60s and 70s. Can-Am cars. I love Can-Am cars. Other Le Mans cars, the Ferraris, they had tube frames with stressed aluminum panels. And even beyond that, you could take that general idea and make it fit for any number of sports car kind of bodies that you could put on it. So anyways, I hope that helps. There's a lot more things that you should know if you're building a car. I'm really into Lotuses, so I'm really into suspension geometry. So maybe we'll do a video and talk about that. And I'll try to base it on kind of practical things on like, here, these parts are available, and here's how to make a system that works. There's a system that for the front suspension I really wish I had found before I built mine, and if I build another one, I'm going to do it that way, and I could talk about that. And we'll end here, and I'll get to work on making some more videos.